Hello, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I think very few of you know me. It's the first time actually that I'm participating, and I think I need to start by introducing myself. You can call me Gracy. I'm Graciele, but Gracy Aquino to the closest ones. And if I can bring something good to you, this is all I want. We received this invitation and it was completely unexpected. I must admit I was not counting on it, but as nothing happens by chance, there must have been some kind of planning on the part of the spirituality, because exactly on the 16th of June, I was dreaming of receiving an invitation like this, coming from a dear friend, João, to take part in a lecture. I didn't know exactly which or what I would do, but we received this notification, and the spirituality, knowing us, must have found a way to make sure there would be no refusal. In fact, I'm very shy. I've never been a lecturer and wouldn't have much to bring to you, but if there was a warning of such a magnitude, maybe it's because there is somebody there very special that needs to listen to what I have to tell you. It may be anyone, it may be no one, or it may be exactly you. And what do I have to tell you today? I have to tell you a little bit about my story with Chico, with Spiritism, and the tribulation that showed up on my way in my life. About 10 years ago, I lost my eyesight. I know it doesn't show, many people won't believe it. My family sometimes forgets it. I myself forget it, that happens a lot. And it all happened so unexpectedly, and at the same time, I was so supported. There was no trauma, there was no despair, at least not from us. It was all very calm. If you want to listen to this story, this testimonial, I'll be very pleased to tell it. Well, I have been diabetic since I was 2 years old, so my health was always a bit fragile, but we dealt with it, no problem. 10 years ago, though, I had a decompensation and needed hospital support. We headed to the local hospital. We expected that the blood glucose would be normal in 2 or 3 days and we could go back home. But this was not what happened. 1 day, 2 days, 1 week, 2 weeks went by, and it only got worse. Nobody understood what was happening. At the end of 2 weeks, I was really almost discarnating. The kidneys were paralyzing. Blood glucose couldn't be controlled anymore. There were liver alterations. The heart was also giving signals of malfunctioning, and nobody understood what was going on. It was then that a cousin who lived in another town and was a medical student asked the family to check the medication that was being given to me. We got so surprised to see that in the prescription there was a medication that shouldn't be given to a patient with diabetes in any circumstance. And I had been taking that for 2 weeks in a dose that was 3 times higher than recommended to a patient without diabetes. So the body couldn't bear it. It was really on the edge. I was very tired and so light at the same time. I watched everything that was going on around me and didn't understand it. I noticed that people were moving differently. There was a lot of apprehension, but at the same time, extreme lightness. It looked like the 2 realms, physical and spiritual, were mixed up, interpenetrated, and I had difficulty to tell one from the other. And while everybody else was worried, I was not. I was feeling so light. Everything was so cozy. Such a wonderful feeling. But I knew it wasn't the moment yet. I had to resist a little bit more. I didn't know what for or why, but it simply wasn't the right time. Resisting was one of the most difficult things that happened. We needed to transfer to a hospital in the city because I'm from a small town in the state of Paraíba. The hospital in this town, I have to ask your permission for not telling names or places and dates because I don't want to expose some people. Later you understand the reason for this. They had to give us the paperwork to the transfer. But when we got to the section in charge of this to fetch the files, we had a surprise. There was nothing there. It was as if I had never been hospitalized there, and the confusion began. Something had happened. Urgent measures had to be taken because I had to be transferred. I needed some support for the transfer, well-equipped ambulance, and so on. And even with it, the chances that I would make it were extremely low. My family, however, decided to give it a try. At that moment, it was most likely that I was going to discarnate. But we wanted to try a little bit more. And while all these things happened, we found out that we wouldn't get the ambulance because without the papers, without being officially hospitalized, there was no way I would be entitled to the well-equipped vehicle. Meanwhile, in the middle of all this, we couldn't find the doctor in the hospital. I won't say his name. I ask you for your understanding because I don't want to expose him. But in the middle of all this turmoil, there wasn't much time to think, time to calculate what to do. It had to be all immediate. This had to be done quick. So my family, who was conducting everything because I was not really aware of what was going on, they improvised a car, hired a private nurse, and decided to leave town in that atmosphere of a chaotic, unsolved situation. The doctor was not actually found. The nurses decided to keep quiet. It's not a moment for you to understand it. This will be understood later on. But the priority at the moment was a different one. That's when our journey begins. I remember it was a 7-hour drive. I had to make use of oxygen, and there was none. I needed other supplies like glucose in the vein, but it was complicated because my venous accesses at that point were already compromised, and there were a series of difficult things. But for me, it was so different, so pleasant, that nice feeling of being floating and at the same time wanting to stay. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. I just enjoyed it somehow. At that moment, I remember that the two biggest desires I had were, one, to drink water. I hadn't drunk water for at least 10 days as the kidneys were paralyzing, so I was really thirsty. I was only allowed to have my lips wet, so I longed for a glass of water. And two, the chance to go to sleep, because during the transfer, the nurse warned us that I couldn't go to sleep, because at the moment, if I slept during that drive, I could not wake up. So I needed to stay conscious for 7.5, 8 hours, and I could only close my eyes for a few seconds and was always reminded not to do so. We finally made it. To the amazement of many people, we made it. We arrived at the city, a bigger city, and I remember that when we arrived, the car pulled over in front of this hospital. It was not allowed to go in as it was not an ambulance, but it parked at a parking lot nearby. And I remember that one of the last visions I had was to look at that building, 12 floors high, contemplating it, the 12 floors, that tender and warm atmosphere that surrounded me, in spite of noticing how worried everybody was that something was about to happen. I remember that someone appeared to me as a nurse and approached me, but it was also confusing that I wasn't able to tell if it was a man or a woman. It looked like it was both at the same time and also none of them. Anyway, it was a person who seemed to be a good friend, so reliable. I remember this person, trustworthy, touched my face and said, "Good, that's all. Now you can rest." And then it was like my desire coming true, and so I rested. Finally, I closed my eyes as I had been longing to do for some time. And I heard later when I woke up at the intensive care unit that I had been on a coma for days. I had lost consciousness. When I asked about that person who helped me, nobody knew who it was. Nobody recognized him or her. Nobody saw it, only me. But it was very good. In the middle of all this chaos, when I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was that I couldn't see anything like I did before. My eyesight, which used to be very good before, was blurred and with traces of blood. I could see that in my visual field. It was confusing. At the time, I thought it was temporary and it would be solved soon, but the days went by and it wasn't solved. We were told that I needed some specialized treatment, which was not possible at that time because I had to remain a patient in the hospital where other priorities were being taken care of, as the problem was not only the eyesight, but other body organs had also been harmed. I was told that I would need multiple transplants of some organs. Kidney for sure, and pancreas was also a possibility. So it was all very busy, very troubled, in the expectation of what was going to happen, of solving priorities. And it was a moment of a deep, intimate dive. At the same time, I noticed that my mediumistic skills had stretched out. Since I was a child, I was a medium. But from that moment on, maybe because of the loosening of body bonds, I was much more sensitive, seeing more, hearing more, and then there was always very pleasant company that always calmed me down, and I was always together with them, mainly those who really made a difference in my journey. They were a gift from God, these discarnated beings that crossed my path, bringing words of comfort, a friendly message, some words of consolation. They were my fortress, and I can't imagine going through all that most difficult experience without them. There's always someone that God uses to take care of us all the time. We are the ones who ignore it, the ones that dive deep into pain, into suffering. And this project, in this way, that it becomes much bigger than it ought to be. And understanding this, I started to feel that things had changed. Clearly, things were going to be different thereafter. We got news that were not good. Day after day, the prognoses were negative. The possibility of a transplant was real. the chance of a rejection by my entire organic framework was high. And at the same time there was that support, that breath of hope. I didn't know where it was coming from, but I could feel it. People crossing our path, as I have said, and I must say that up to that moment I was a Catholic. I come from a Catholic cradle. The Spiritism hadn't come to my life until a little after that. As I said just now, during this process of the mediumship, which was already important, had been amplified, my mediumship. But it turned into something worrying as well, because I was coming from a period of emotion and psychological fragility due to all that I had been going through, obviously. All the doors to negative influence were also opened. And that's what happened at that moment. I was very sad after leaving the hospital. 43 days later, we managed to go on with the treatment at home, being monitored by 19 medical specialists, countless procedures, not always comfortable, but trusting in God. Although, in spite of all this trust, I was getting a bit sad because, after all, our path was dotted with joy and sorrows all the time. Due to all this, we had to get help from a spiritist house. And it's interesting because even though I come from a Catholic family where there's strong prejudice against Spiritism, things got to a point where it was not possible to go on. It was really necessary to search for any possible help, as even physical effects had been going on at home, and these things were getting out of control. And here comes the first curiosity. My mother always had recurrent dreams of me as I was growing up. She found me being taken care of by friends in a house that she didn't recognize. She followed the path and always found me at this house. And as I grew up, her dreams started to evolve. And from these people's laps, later on I was playing. Then I was studying with these people. So when we searched for the Spiritist house, we looked for one which was closer to our house, and she went out to find it. On that day, I was extremely weak physically and really couldn't go with her. I had recently undergone foot surgery, a sequence of 4 actually, and had difficulty to walk, so she went on her own. As the town was new for her, we were living in the city of João Pessoa, a new place for us. She ended up lost. And when she got lost trying to find this address, she recognized the neighborhood from her dreams. She recognized the path, the same streets. She thought about the possibilities and decided to remember her dreams and followed the same way. She arrived at exactly the same Spiritist house. She didn't know it was a Spiritist house, obviously, but she recognized the road, she recognized the address, and even some of the people. And this was fundamental because, as I said, there's a lot of prejudice in the family. She had it herself, I had it myself. Listen, so you can have an idea. When I was 10, I was being prepared for my first Holy Communion and had my first confession. And the biggest sin I had to tell the priest was that I loved Chico Xavier. I was a Catholic, a practicing Catholic. I attended Mass every Sunday. I did everything right. I was baptized. I follow all the rites. But I loved Chico Xavier. And it was a love that didn't have an explanation. No explanation. Since I was a child, he was quite old. On the TV, they showed his interviews, and I stopped, sat down, and watched. I was mesmerized in front of the TV listening. I couldn't understand what he said. I couldn't grasp it. But it didn't matter. All I wanted was to see him. I didn't want anything else. It was love, and at the same time, a feeling of longing for him that until today I find it difficult to understand. But I needed to confess to the priest that I loved him, and that was when I received a reply that was so reassuring and at the same time so liberating. At that moment, the priest said to me that I didn't need to worry, that love was not a sin, that I could go on loving Chico Xavier like that, truly, because he was someone who did a lot of charity. He was someone who spoke about Jesus in a beautiful way, and he himself admired Chico, and there was no problem in that, even though he told me to say the Lord's Prayer and Hail Mary as a penance. I did it with a light heart. I did it. So since childhood, I nurtured this love and longed for Chico. So when my mother found this place, as I said, in this context of recognizing from her dreams, which was extremely important because otherwise it could have been very difficult for her and for the family to accept it. She turned out accepting it in such a way that she resigned her activities in the Catholic Church. She had some positions there. She gave them up for 3 months, which was the period required for the spiritual treatment that I needed to take. And I was extremely fragile physically, and I needed to have someone with me. And she was the only possibility that I had at that moment. So for 3 months, my mother was there with me, my rock, supporting me, taking part in everything. At the end of these 3 months, I already showed a significant organic improvement. I was amazed with the knowledge I was getting from the Spiritist Center, André Luiz. And I noticed that that place was actually my new home. It was another home that from that moment on, I would be going back to the companionship of people who were such good friends before. So at the end of these 3 months, my mother trusted me because of my visual impairment, which we knew wouldn't be temporary at that point. We knew it. My mother trusted me to the care of some reliable people and resumed her normal activities in the Catholic Church. No, she didn't identify herself with the Spiritist teachings. It was not the right moment for her. Each one of us has his or her own faith. Each one of us has his or her own way of following the good and the love of God, and she preferred Christ's teachings explained by the Catholic Church. And me, I discovered that there was no other way for me, that my new home in the heart was the Spiritism in every possible way. Then I felt the need to study, but to make matters worse, we learned that in less than 6 months, I would lose my eyesight completely. I would be totally blind, and this was really a true reason for worrying. Not because I would be in the dark, but I worried because everything was new to me. New people, new friends, a new place, a surrounding in which I didn't know how to move easily. So, what was the strategy? In relation to the content, I had 6 months before losing my eyesight completely. Then, what was the plan? I would try to read as much as I could. I would take good advantage of these months in the best possible way. Do you remember how thirsty I felt when I was sick, having to be transferred to a bigger hospital with my kidneys about to paralyze? Well, this thirst lingered on, but now the liquid that I needed to absorb was not water anymore. It was that liquid which set you free, calmed you down, enlightened, and gave you comfort. And most of all, brought with it a wide range of responsibilities. I had this enormous thirst for all this. So I did take advantage. I took maximum advantage, and among the first books that I started reading, I didn't have much time. I had to race against time. Was Chico's biography by Marcel Sotomayor. That story touched me so deeply that there wasn't a night or a day reading it, racing against time, that I didn't feel moved, that I didn't weep. That story, that love that I felt for Chico seemed to have expanded. That admiration made everything become much more latent, much more intense. He became more alive to me day by day. So for 1 year, I wrote messages of love and gratitude to Chico. The first ones I was able to see what I was writing, but from the second half on, I could no longer see what I was writing. I hope he saw them and understood. When I get to the spiritual plane and have the opportunity to meet him, I really hope it happens. I have real faith that it will happen. I think my first question will be, Chico, did you read my message? I know it's sort of naive and innocent, but this is the way I am. Don't take into consideration, I'm a crybaby. I'm emotional, always with a smile in my face. But most of all, I am fascinated with life and the people who cross my path. And Chico, even though we never met physically in this lifetime, because there was no time for it in this reincarnation, he's one of those people who seemed to me to be with me on the other side. I have the sensation that he lives in a small house not far from where I live. That at any moment when I miss him, I can manage to go over there, knock on the door and say, Chico, I'm here. Can we talk? And I do this. I do it in my thoughts. And how good it is. How liberating it is to know that how important our thoughts are. They have power. We can shape so much for them. So much we can transform. We can transform paths, consciences, and go back a little bit in time. Maybe there's some of you wondering what happened before about the situation with the doctor. Did it stay like that? Did the paperwork simply disappear? Was ever she in the hospital? Did anybody ever talk about it? I'm going to tell you so you can notice that at every moment we receive great opportunities, and how our way of conducting things can change paths. Because When I was still in hospital in these 43 days that were excruciating, really very tough, we received a phone call from a woman that identified herself as one of the nurses that worked in that first hospital. And she said she had felt outraged at all that she had to witness. And she was one of the people that the doctor had put in charge of burning the paperwork. And she said that, in fact, I had been hospitalized there. At that time, the doctor was also the head of the hospital, so he could deliberate that. It wouldn't be right, but he could, in the sense that he was the head of the bureaucratic power. He could do it, but obviously it was not correct. Then she said that she didn't have the courage to burn the paperwork, and that she would make everything available to us, adding that she would be willing to be one of the witnesses in case we wanted to take him to court. Naturally, the family was extremely moved, and in the excitement of, yes, let's do it, it's just fair, the debts were high. Although we had health plan, many things were not covered, so we had to make use of our savings. But the decision was up to me. The last decision was mine. And what did I decide? I decided that it was not the best thing to do. And what was it that waited in all that? What led me into not taking that action? It was that I received a second chance. I received the possibility and the opportunity. I could stay there with my family, my loved ones, not so much with my friends as we had to move to another city. They got to be a little farther away, but in spite of this, we could talk to one another, we could visit in spite of the distance, although it would take longer, not so often, but we could. So if this was true to me, why not for him? If I could receive this opportunity, why not him? And there was something else that waited even more than this. When I was still in hospital, getting worse each day at that stage, when we didn't know what was happening, the room where I was faced the corridor, which was very close to the other wing of the hospital, where people in need were attended. While I was there at all times, we could see people saying goodbye, getting discharged from the hospital, and I heard so many thank yous and I saw so many smiles. I'm going home, I have recovered, thanks to Dr. So and so. I won't say the names, let's preserve them. I was so touched. There were so many people, and I imagined, what if that man was a grandfather of mine? What if it was my father being discharged? What if that lady was my mother? It could be, couldn't it? Then I was taken by a feeling of wanting to thank him. He's human. This doctor is human. We can make mistakes. All of us can make mistakes in the field of medicine. The professionals are entrusted with so much in a way that, sure, it's a big responsibility after all. They're dealing with life from the organic point of view. But it's a thing that always touched me. They can also make mistakes. They don't do this on purpose, at least not most of them. And we have a genuine faith in this. Why not this doctor? And if he failed me, he succeeded with so many people? Why would one failure be worth more than so many successes? Where is the justice in this? No, I wouldn't do that. Of course, my family didn't understand it immediately that a battle was necessary. But I managed to convince them. They understood my point of view, and I remember that before I fell into coma, before my eyesight was damaged, one of the last clear images that stayed in my visual field, in my memory, must have been of this doctor. Because every time he went to visit me in those 2 weeks, to know how I was doing, to accompany me, he was the one who came in with a smile, a word, a touch. He shook my hand and said that I was going to get well. And I believed in him so much. Things didn't work out as well as we expected, but seen from other ways they did. Those people, how many of those families had their dear ones at home? How many of those families celebrated? How many children had their parents, those little ones? No, I had to say thank you. And this was the way that I found to say thank you, not to go to court, since this would be very harmful. We never talked again. We didn't know what happened to him. Possibly he made a mistake. But I like to think that actually there are no victims in this story, like in any other. It was an encounter of needs. It was a need of ours, a need of my family, of those who cross my path, and those who will cross it, of you who is listening to this testimonial. So why not? Why not thank him for having accomplished something that was entrusted to him? And if he made a mistake in the abuse of power in relation to the paperwork, who among us could say that in the same situation, being the family provider and the head of the hospital, which allowed him to do this in a moment of panic, knowing that he could eventually lose his license to practice medicine, could be prevented from clinical practice? Who could say, I wouldn't do that? No, this was completely wrong. In this position, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't have the courage. Well, I say from the bottom of my heart, only experiencing it, I would say I wouldn't do it. If I knew my family depended on my material support, my work, and that I could undermine it. He had children, still young, very young. I don't know if I were in this situation, so how to judge? What right do we have to do that? I know we judge practically all the time in small situations, but the Spiritist doctrine came and reminded us of our responsibility. Well, so everything happened simultaneously. And it was funny, not so funny. Funny is not the right word. It was magic, really magical in the most beautiful sense that this word may have. Because in the middle of all those decisions, in the middle of the organic problems, in the middle of the pain, the surgeries that I was still undergoing, the rehabilitation processes, after all it took me 9 months to start walking again. I came across messages from Chico, his psychographies, which were not messages meant to anybody else. For God's sake, they were meant to me. I understand that they weren't really for everybody, but they were so deep, so touching, so clarifying that just imagine I couldn't walk properly because, in fact, my feet were bandaged from the surgeries. I had had problems during to the long time lying in the hospital bed, and all of the sudden you come across a message, always trust, from May May, saying that although your feet are bleeding, to trust, to put the faith above all, to work, to assist, even though the feet were really bleeding. That message was for me. It was the path being signaled. It was so, that was the difficulty. I had the lesson there. Chico had psychographed not one but dozens of messages because the days were going by and I went on with my reading, each time with more difficulties, it's true, but the little I was able to do transformed me so much, liberated so much, gave me so much hope. How was it possible not to follow? What is the purpose of the theory if not the practice? I needed to practice, and that's what I've been making an effort to do since then, practice. And Chico, who was a part of my childhood, of my youth, started to be a part of my adulthood in a much more latent, much more vibrant way. Through his work in mediumship of pure light, he lit up the paths the spirituality used him. For God's sake, how grateful I am to these spirits. In the moments of the biggest difficulty, of the greatest pain, of the greatest uncertainty, they asserted what was the path. Only one, Jesus, our model and guide. It's there in question 625 of the Spirit's book that all good spiritists should know. If a spiritist is born like that from the cradle, he knows it and memorizes it. Jesus is the model and guide, and every day I had this injection of spirit. So I noticed that when it hurt, when the body hurt, when the heart hurt, when the uncertainty hurt, I noticed that something set me free. And what was it? Hope, trust, fidelity, and faith. This is the word that goes back to its origins being in Greek or Hebrew. It comes from fidel, from trust, fidelity really. So if Jesus is our model and guide, I need to, and here I speak for myself, I need to have a relationship of fidelity with the one I adopt as a model, with the one I propose myself to follow. If he is my guide, I trust, I surrendered myself. And Chico, in this whole process, and this I must repeat 1,000 times, not to everybody who listens, but to myself, because every time I say it, it seems that I overflow with more love, with more gratitude. Chico has been a light, and an immense light, an immense love. If he did all this for me in this period of 10 years, going back to my childhood, imagine how much he had done for those hundreds, thousands of people. In the old videos that we watch with crowds being fed, being cherished, I say, my Lord, have your hand kissed by Chico. I wonder who had this merit, who keeps in their memory such a beautiful image. I wish I did. I don't have it now, but we have other ways of feeling him, of living close to him. Be it through dreams, be it through dear friends who cross our path and talk about him. tell stories that make our path so much more flowered, much more beautiful. My Lord, how grateful I am to each one of you who bring this beautiful message from Chico. Here, I'm not referring only to the ones that he psychographed, the incredible works, Paul and Stephen, Renounce, oh God. What incredible books! His love for Jesus, it's impossible not to be enchanted. But here I really refer to all of you who are the messengers of love, of charity, and who are the messengers of the luminosity that emanated and still emanates from Chico, depicting his daily life. He became a living example, a material, palpable example that moved, walked among us. Very recently, the fact that it's possible to be like him if we dedicate ourselves, if we try hard. It's not necessary that heaven and earth move, that they are transformed. Of course, unbelieved phenomena happened with him, although we know that some which border the limit of being unbelieved but happened to him. He brings such simplicity, such purity. Like, go ahead, do it, try it. You too, try your little bit. And I kept thinking about Chico's social assistance work, for example. Chico feeding millions, distributing bread, soup. And I kept wondering which one was the first bowl of soup. There were so many throughout the years, and it goes on, like, since his work reflects even today. Friendly hearts that love him, hearts that welcome him with generosity and genuinely carry on pursuing this beautiful work. But I keep thinking it's a scary volume, a giant enterprise, and why not take a little part in this? Why not do my part? I can't afford to distribute uncountable bread, thousands of soup bowls, or build buildings, construct houses to welcome little children, welcome the needy, the homeless. But a little bit I can do. A little bit you can do, even if you doubt it. And you don't even need to be in excellent health, feeling happy. Because the truth is that on the stage that we are, on the path that we are, it doesn't belong to us, not yet. But we are treading this part, aren't we? And don't you think it's necessary to give our best? To give something from our hearts? Something material if possible, but if not possible, there's so much immaterial that we can donate. A friendly word. And here I would like to bring an example of a situation. I would have many others to tell. I would be able to talk over 10 hours non-stop, telling more and more stories. Some friends say that my treasure chest of stories is huge, and thank God it is like that. I love it. I love my life. I think it's very beautiful. There is one that I would like to share with you now. When I was still hospitalized in the process of to do the transplant or not to do the transplant, I went through all the procedures, followed the line. I took all the exams, and when we got to the end, the medical team came to the conclusion that it was too risky. The risk of doing it was much bigger than the risk of not doing it. If the transplant was not done, I could have some survival time. It could be months, 1 year, 2 years. It was unpredictable. It wouldn't be a lot because my organic situation was really very complicated, but the agreement was not to do it. Between you and me, 10 years have passed and I'm still here. Spirits don't want me on the other side yet, and I'm enjoying it. I love being here longer. The longer I stay, the better. I'm thankful. It's just a little secret between us. Well, when this process was over, when the one with the transplants, we had a negative answer. What now? What was going to happen? How long did I have to live? We received an invitation to contribute in a scientific research. There wouldn't be any financial gain, but I was very glad to be able to collaborate. It was a great joy. So during this period, we spent 2 weeks longer there in this other city for gathering genetics material for every kind of evaluation possible. Neurological, cardiological, they did a whole battery of exams. It was a research from the United States with a partnership with the Federal University of the state where I was. So in these 2 weeks, while I was taking the tests, I got in contact with the people who were in a situation somewhat similar to mine. However, with a prognosis of discarnating soon. People with no way out. They would in fact discarnate. Most of them had cancer in an advanced stage. Some of them were already smelling bad because parts of their body were visibly deteriorating. They were extremely fragile. And this was the sector where I was, together with them. And we had the chance to talk a lot. There is nothing better than talking with these people, sharing experiences. After all, for better or for worse, we were all sort of in the same boat. And what was the subject that we enjoyed most? Jesus, the gospel. I was at that initial stage of getting to know the Spiritist doctrine, absolutely thrilled, totally excited, wishing more people would learn more. I still had that thirst I told you about. So we were people from different religions. There were only a few Spiritists. Some people were Catholic, evangelical, Umbanda believers. So we had to step a little on the brake. Some subjects. Jesus in this field is universal. We could talk about the gospel. But some subjects like reincarnation, life in the spiritual realms, those pillars of the belief in the immortality of the soul had to be dealt with caution. So what did I think? What idea did I have? What can be more welcoming, more cuddling in a group like this? Chico's stories. Let's tell Chico's stories. Why, I thought, those people are going to discarnate soon. Maybe me too. That was what was expected. What about these people? Are they minimally prepared? I would like to help them a little. I don't know very much. I'm at the beginning. I have read too little. The little I know, why not try to share with them? So I did it, my way, calmly, with caution, and making use of the wonderful stories of Chico's. A group of people gathered there. They were the patients who were there accompanying people. Sometimes health professionals joined us, and each one of them shared a little. Those who didn't know any of Chico's favorite stories also shared, and it was great. But in the middle of this group, though, during those 2 weeks, a lady stood out. Why? Well, when someone asked, "Tell me something, what's your religion?" I was feeling a little shy here, I confess. Maybe some won't admit it, but it's very common among us that in those early transition periods between being Catholic or any other denomination, and you start to recognize yourself as a spiritist, it is as if you're treading on a ground that you know it's safe, but you're not sure, you feel a little embarrassed. Should I say it or not? And that was the first time I publicly assumed to be a spiritist. Then I took a deep breath and said, I am a spiritist for the first time. And then some people started saying, look, oh God, I'm not. But one lady who listened to everything with attention turned her back to me. She didn't look in my face anymore. She turned her back to me. She wasn't able to talk because her cancer was very advanced. It was all in the area of her throat, so she had her throat all bandaged to stop the fluids that came out. She didn't have a nose anymore because her respiration tract was damaged. She was at a stage which was very painful, and she was evangelical. It was not a case of prejudice. There's such a thing on the part of many evangelicals, but it was not her case. Her case was special. So she turned her back to me. Of course, it hurt me. For me, it was very difficult to digest. Then I swallowed hard, but I thought the other people were receptive. So let's go on. If there is only one who listens to us and turns out discarnating, if he or she had the minimum guidance, at least the one I can provide, it might be helpful. And we carried on along those 2 weeks. What is surprising is that that lady had the possibility of simply not taking part in that group of discussion, of not sitting together with us. She could move, but she didn't. She came every day. However, when she got there, she stood up and turned her back to me, as if she was making a protest. She couldn't speak, but she kept on listening. Naturally, it made me sad, but we went on. That spark of hope, at least she was listening. It might be helpful, I don't know. I know it's just a while, but unexpectedly, something that we may bring. There was the other people of the group too cooperating, each one bringing their experience. Everything is valid. Everything you do from the heart in the name of Jesus is valid. And all of us were there in this way. So at the end of the second week, there was nothing else for me to do there. I had completed all the steps of the research. I had signed the contract. Everything had been liberated. All the use of the exams had been released. Anyway, there wasn't anything else for me to do there, so I was going back home, and we went to say goodbye to the group, and there was all that emotion, and again she gave her back to me. I was hoping that at that moment she wouldn't do that, but she did. And then when I was about to leave together with my mom carrying our bags, all of a sudden I heard a shout from someone saying, "Girl, girl." Then I turned, looked back, and someone said, "That lady over there is calling you. She's calling you." And the lady was her. Then when I turned, I just had an impact. It was her. She ran and hugged me. She gave me the cuddliest hug of my life so far. And I don't know how to explain what happened at that moment, because she usually smelled so bad, she exhaled such unpleasant odors that many people tried to keep away from her, with good manners as much as possible and showing respect, but they did. But at the time of that hug, I didn't feel absolutely anything. No bad smell, nothing bad coming from her. Quite the opposite. It was so nice, so cuddly, so good. It was one of the warmest hugs I gave. I think it stayed in my memory, and that if I keep memories from this life to another reincarnation, this could be the scene, judging from the impact it had on me. A scene I might remember in another life, so strong and so beautiful that it was. So when she cried, and she cried a lot, when I understood that in her way, the way that she still could communicate, she was thanking me. But at the same time, it was not a thank you to me, because I had done almost nothing. I had just talked about the things that saved me, that had saved me, liberated me. I could do the same for other people too. Then, when we said goodbye to one another, I still remember her companion saying that she was sorry. Please, I'm sorry. You should take a bath. You're not smelling so well. I remember that I tried to smell myself, but I didn't feel absolutely anything of that. I didn't feel it. It was completely blocked out. Maybe because I was so caught in that atmosphere of affection, of hope. Then we came back home and we heard that she had discarnated on that same night. And thank you to the friendly spirituality. Thank you to Chico. Thank you to the people who give us support by talking about him. All of them. All of them, from those who write the books, those who take time away from their families to be there, dedicated, those who devote themselves to the edition of these works, the sales, the distribution, those who buy the books and after reading them, donate them to the libraries of Spiritism. So these books keep on being a source of light. It's such a great work that each one can do their small part and be an effective collaborator of Christ. So this story was a landmark, and I would like to share this example with you, that we can always do something, be it through words, through feelings, through experience. May the example be the strongest and most contagious action. We can actually be this example. We can go unfolding our path of learning and liberation, and may the good spirits be with us. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much to those who listened to us until now. Thank you.